Hello, it's JJ from Mythical City Games, and we're back with episode 6 of Snow Fortress Rush, our YouTube tutorial series on using generative AI with Unity game development. So since the last episode, we've added a couple of little things to the game to improve some of the visuals and build upon some of the UI that we had done before. So if we take a look now, we've got, of course, our start game, and we've added a little bit of effects to the blocks when they start to break and are damaged so that you can see the effect of snowballs, so that you know that throwing snowballs will damage the blocks. We've also added a pause menu, so if you press escape, you now have a pause menu that will pause the game. You can now also restart the game from here or view the leaderboards, of course. And in this episode, we're going to add in a little bit of power-ups so that you can destroy certain kinds of blocks and get some power-ups or restore your health. To get started, let's go back to ChatGPT, and we've got our Unity Dev Helper GPT here. So we'll start with a little bit of a description of the game, of course, like we always do, to give it a little bit of context and describe the kind of system that we want. Okay, so I've described the game a little bit, saying that this is a 3D game where the player is playing a snowman attacking a fort made of blocks of snow, and that I would like to add a power-up system to the game so that certain blocks that the player destroys can contain certain power-ups or restore the player's health, have to touch to pick up, and the other that is immediate when the block is destroyed. For instance, health restore should be immediate when the block is destroyed. Can you help me design a system like this and suggest some possible power-ups we could use? So this is an example of actually using ChatGPT and AI to help you with design decisions and give you some suggestions as well. So lots of times when you're coming up with a system, for example, like a power-up, you're maybe not sure of exactly what kind of power-ups you should include, and you sort of have to brainstorm some ideas. This way, you can use the AI to help you brainstorm and come up with some ideas a little bit faster. So I've also added that our blocks are generated by a wall generator script, and then we can use this to decide whether to generate power-up blocks instead of regular blocks. There should be a random chance to generate a power-up block and a space for prefabs we can use to assign the different power-up blocks that could be generated instead of a regular block. So I pasted in the relevant portion of our generate wall script here, so it has an idea of how that looks, and also our health script, so we can see when the blocks get destroyed. So it's come up with a few suggestions for us here, including designing of the power-up system, about the two types of power-ups that we mentioned, and how to put the code into the block, into the wall generator. So here's a suggestion of how to modify the wall generator. So let's take a look at this, and we can copy in some of these relevant portions and put them into our script. And then there's also the power-up block script. This is the script that will actually go onto our blocks to indicate the functionality of the power-up. There's also some ideas for different power-up types and how to integrate it with our existing health script. So the example script it's provided for the power-up is very specific just for this one type of power-up. But perhaps the best thing to do is actually have a generic class that we can then derive from. So I've mentioned that we want to expand on the power-up script to make a general class that we can use for all power-ups, and then have individual scripts that derive from the power-up script that we can use to specify the functionality of each one. So here we go, and it's created a power-up base class here for us, some kind of basic functionality, and then it's also come up with additional varieties of power-ups. So for example, a health restore. So let's go ahead and copy this one over, and we'll create this power-up script. So here's our generic script, and we'll just replace this code with the new code. And it looks like we have one little error, as that we are missing the namespace for the IEnumerator, which is just system, so we can add that ourselves. Okay, and then we want to also make our changes to the wall generator so that we can actually generate these power-up blocks randomly. So let's see what changes we need to add in. If we go back to ChatGPT, we've got these two items here for the types of power-ups that are going to be generated and their chance. So we can put that into our properties. And for this part, we want to put this into our generate wall area here. Now we've got a couple of different spots. So we have a section here where we instantiate the blocks that are used for the crenulations at the top of the wall. And so those ones will be specific types of blocks. We don't want those to be power-ups. We just want regular wall blocks to be power-ups. So this is the section here where we can actually decide whether this is going to be a power-up or just a regular block. Okay, great. So this is pretty simple code. It's just having a random chance to spawn the power-up, and if not, then we just spawn a regular block prefab as before. And in this case, it has suggested that maybe we use this for the crenellation blocks as well, but we don't want to do that, so I'm just going to remove this piece of code. So this is only going to be for regular types of blocks. Okay, so we're going to save that, and let's go back to Unity. And to test if this works, we're going to have to create some sort of a placeholder for the power-up block. So I'm going to go to our wall that's closest to us, so we can test this very easily when we start. This should be our closest wall. And now we have our new spots for code here, so the power-up block types, as well as the power-up chance. So this is going to be each time it generates a block, there's a 10% chance that it's a power-up. Now it's a little bit of a high chance considering how many blocks we have, so let's reduce that a little bit, maybe to 5% chance. And to create the power-up block, I'm going to take a regular block and use that as a base for the prefabs. So let's create a prefab variant for this. And this is going to be our snow block health restore. And for now, let's just change this visually. And we've got ourselves our health block material right here already that we've generated for Snow Fortress 2. Okay, so we don't have any functionality for that block, but it's just so we can see whether the generation is working. Okay, so we've run that and there's an error here. So let's take a look at what's happening. Okay, so in cases where we haven't assigned yet a power-up block, it is going to have an error because there is nothing in this part. So we should always double check for this before we actually instantiate these kinds of blocks. So to do that, I'm just going to update this if statement to make sure that we actually have power-up blocks in our list. So this will make sure that we actually have more than 0 power-up blocks, and then we'll be able to generate them. Otherwise, we'll just generate regular blocks always. So not every wall is going to have power-up blocks, and this gives us that flexibility. So we've got ourselves our generated walls, and looks like the wall where we assigned the block actually has generated a few of these health blocks. So we can take a look at these closely, and there we go. Now let's add the functionality for the health restore. So the health restore is going to be a script that's based on our general power-up block script as was generated by the AI. Let's take a look at that script. So here's our health power-up. We're going to go ahead and copy that over, and it's called the health restoration power-up. That's a bit of a long name. I'm going to change that. So to keep these scripts all similar and close to each other, I'm just going to make sure that they all start with the word power up. That way we'll be able to find all the power up types easily. So let's go ahead and paste that over our old script. Okay, so this one derives from our regular power up class, and then it's got an amount of health to restore here, in this case 5. So this way we can have them restore only, for example, 1 heart or 2 hearts or full health as well. So now it overrides the apply effect, which is how this actually works. And that way it's going to apply the health to our health script. And then it has instructions for us here how to use the actual power-up code. So it's suggesting that we actually reference the object and call the activate power-up line whenever we want to. In this case, let's just have the power-ups activate based on their type. So we can do this part in Visual Studio. We can ask Copilot to help us with this section. So we want to have those 2 power-up types that I mentioned before. Let's go ahead and create an enum for that. Okay, so we've got an on contact, which means if it's going to be touched, and then an on destroy. And again, this is something that was suggested by Copilot, so we can use that right here. So we need to assign this to each power-up. And Copilot's gone ahead and detected that, and that's what we want to add, and it's created this variable for us with a default as well. So first let's set up if this is going to be a contact activation type. We're going to use a trigger collision to detect whether this has been touched. Okay, it's filled in the rest of that function for us. So if it is an on contact type, then it's going to activate the power up. And let's also add our on destroy type. And it's gone ahead and already suggested that code for us as well. So all we have to do is press tab. And now we've got on destroy. For that type of activation, it will activate the power up right away. Now, if this is going to be destroyed, this power up, then we don't want to call any other coroutines after the object has been destroyed. So since we're making this change here, let's go ahead and clean up this part as well so this doesn't happen. Okay, so only for the on contact activation types will this code get called. And for the health power up, let's just update this so that we actually can find the player's health and affect the player's health instead of the health of the actual power up block itself, which is what this game object target would take. So in this case, we know that player health is its own script, so it derives from regular health. So let's go ahead and update this. And since we already have only this take damage method here for our player health, let's create a restore health function so that we can call that specifically when we're restoring health instead of just using the negative version of damage. And it's even suggested a heal function for us here, which we can just go ahead and use. So it's going to add the health to the existing health, make sure that doesn't go above the max, and then also update the health changed, which is our action for updating things like the UI. And now that we have that for the regular health script, we can also go back to our player health, and it's easy to add in the override for that. We don't even have to do anything. So in this case, Copilot has detected our change, and it knows that we want to also override the heal function with specific code for this. So we'll save that. And in this case here, we don't need to do health damage negative. Let's actually call our new heal function. And there it is. Okay, let's go back to Unity and test all of that out. And to set up this power-up block, of course, we have to add our new power-up script that we have. So we can open up our health restore prefab, add power-up health restore. There we go. So in this case, it's not going to be an on contact. We're going to do an on destroy. So as soon as this block is destroyed, it will give us this amount of health back. So here we go. We've got lots of health blocks here, but of course, just for testing, so we can see how they work. So if I destroy one of them now, nothing should happen because we're at max health. So those health blocks, as you can see, they still spawn the damage effect that we have. So we should disconnect that from the heal command. Now, if we take damage, there's one we've lost a health. And let's destroy one of these heal blocks. And there we go. We're back to full health again. So it looks like that works well. We just need to get rid of the visual of the damage. So our health UI here is tied to show the damage effect no matter whenever the health UI is updated. So in this case, we only want to show this if the health has actually been decreased, which would mean we want to show the damage effect. If the health has been increased, we don't want to show this damage effect, of course. To do that, I'm just going to make that its own separate function. And damage frost, I'm just going to change this to damage effect. Okay, now if we go back to player health, we can just call that function from damage. And it's gone ahead and suggested that line of code for us right away because it knows the change we just made. So let's test that out. And this time when we heal, we should not have any actual damage effect showing. One thing that you can notice is that the blocks, as soon as they get hit, the health blocks, the texture gets changed to just the regular damage texture. That's because we have this system right now in place that changes the material and the texture to show this little bit of cracking damage. And that just uses the regular plain block texture. So let's just update that so it will use the special version that has the heart on it. Okay, let's test that out. So now if I damage one of the health blocks, you can see it's got a little crack on it, just like the regular blocks, and the texture, the heart doesn't disappear from it. Okay, great. Now that we've got health working, let's add in another power-up type. So the AI suggested we add a speed boost power-up, which should be a lot of fun. But in this case, it's assumed that we have a player movement class. And this is because we haven't really provided any additional information about how we are moving our player. So it's just sort of made an assumption for us. But all we need to do is give it a little bit of additional details when we see that something has been generated that doesn't really apply to our code. In this case, because we use the snowman controller to move our actual snowman, let's copy in some of the relevant code to give the AI a little bit of context about this. So what I've done is explained how we'd like to adjust this. So I said for the speed boost power up, we're using a script called snowman controller to control our player's movement. Can you suggest a function that we can add to the snowman controller to adjust the speed and also update the speed boost power up code? So I pasted in our example of this snowman controller. So it's got a little bit of a reference, and let's see what it comes up with. So it's created functions here for us to add to our snowman controller. Let's go ahead and add those. So it's suggested that we change the actual movement speed variable that we have, which we use throughout our code. And that's one way to do it, but I'm going to just adjust this a little bit so that we don't change this original and we use the original as our default speed. So let's put that in here, movement speed. And the speed that we're going to use to actually move will be another variable that will be private and just used for the movement, and it can be adjusted throughout the code. So let's put that in, current movement speed, and we can just set that value to the default equals movement speed. And we also need to change where we're actually using that. Okay, and then current movement speed. Okay, cool. So this way we don't change our original movement speed with this code. So that gives us a way to adjust the speed of the player. Now let's go back to ChatGPT and we'll create a new script for the speed boost power up. So we'll follow the same naming convention we did before. So power up and then speed boost. Okay, so let's paste in the code from ChatGPT. Let's just change this class name to match the file. Power up speed boost. Now, because this is going to be a power up that has a effect that only lasts for a certain amount of time, we're going to need to keep this script around and not just destroy it along with the block or the power up object. So to do that, we're going to want to modify our actual block script to do this. Now, since this type of power-up is going to work a little bit differently, it will be on a trigger enter, which means when it's touched by the player, the power-up will activate instead of when it's destroyed. And because the power-up needs to deactivate after a certain amount of time, we need to be able to have a method for hiding the actual power-up object because it's been consumed by the player, but not actually destroying the entire thing, so that this script can continue running and then deactivate itself after a certain amount of time. So let's go ahead and ask the AI for some suggestions on how to do that. Okay, so what I've done is explained a little bit of these changes and how we would like to adjust the power-up system so it would work with our contact type as well. So for the on-contact power-up type, we need a power-up to expire. Currently, this is done by a coroutine, but this requires that the power-up object is not destroyed so that the coroutine continues to run. However, we will need to destroy the power-up as soon as they are consumed. So maybe we should add a power-up effect deactivation to the script that is being affected in the first place, i.e. the snowman controller. And then I've pasted in the changes that we've made to the code since the last AI suggestions and some of the things that we've modified that don't align with the original code suggestions. Okay, so it's suggested that we have this start power-up effect and this effect coroutine on the actual snowman controller. And it looks like it's made this kind of generic. So let's add in some of these code changes it suggested. We'll put this into the snowman controller. Okay, and again, we need to add the system class so we can reference this part using system collections, and Copilot's already detected that for us and made that change. And let's adjust the power up code. So this is our speed boost power up as before. And let's just copy this whole thing over and we will replace the original. So here's our speed boost power up and we'll replace that. Okay, so it's done this through a system of actions. Instead of actually creating specific functions for doing all of this, it's gone ahead and created this set of actions that will be called one after the other based on our effect time. This is kind of a neat way of doing it. This way it makes it a little bit more generic, so we can use this with all kinds of different effects. Okay, and we probably then don't need the original code that we had in PowerUp that deactivates the PowerUp. So deactivate after time, we can actually remove this as we don't really need it. So now that we've got our speed boost script, let's go ahead and create a speed boost PowerUp for us here. So we've got our regular power-up blocks. So let's go ahead and we can start with a copy of just the health restore because it's pretty similar to the speed boost. So I'm going to duplicate that and let's rename it to speed boost. And then I can just modify the texture as well. So we're going to need a new texture. for this one with the little speed boost icon. So to do that, I'm just going to duplicate our healing block texture, rename it. Now we've got ourselves a little speed boost texture. Okay, so I've got this icon to indicate that this is going to be a speed boost block. And we need to also replace the script. So we don't want the health script on here. We can remove that. And let's add on the Powerup speed boost. There we go. This lets us control how long we want the Powerup to run for. So in this case, it's 5 seconds. Let's give it a little bit more time, 10 seconds. It's going to be an on contact type. And it's going to give us a double speed boost multiplier. And what we want to do is also change the visual of this a little bit so that we know that this is an object we have to touch rather than destroy. So we can remove the health script on it since we're not going to destroy it this way. So we are going to leave the regular collider on it here so that it can still be affected by physics. But we're also going to add on another type of collider, a trigger collider that's a little bit bigger that'll let us activate this when we get close to it. So let's add a sphere collider. And we'll set that to a trigger type. And we need to actually just adjust the size so it is a little bit bigger than the block. There we go. Just round that off to 1. And let's make this material slightly transparent so it looks like it could be moved through. So we've got our speed boost block set up here. And let's put one into the scene so we can test this out. So we've got one right here near our start area. And what we're going to do is just make this speed something really high so we can actually notice that the effect is working. I'm going to do this as 5 times our speed. Save that, and let's run it and see if we can actually get a speed boost. Okay, so there's our little speed boost block, and there we go. Now we're able to move a lot faster, and then once it expires, we go back down to our regular speed. There we go. Now we're back at regular speed. And I guess the last thing is that this speed boost should be destroyed once we actually collect it, because we don't just want to be able to keep getting it over and over again. So let's just go back to our code. So we can add this as part of our actual speed boost Powerup code, because we want this type of Powerup to only affect snowmen. So it's going to collide with all kinds of other things at first, but we only actually want to be able to collide with the player. And when it collides with the player, we want it to get destroyed at that point. So we can find the snowman controller here. And then if we do find it, we go ahead and run this effect, and then we can just destroy the actual speed boost. So here's our power up again, and we walk up to it, and now it's destroyed, and we are speed boosted. And after 10 seconds, our speed boost is gone, and we move back again at normal speed. Okay, great. So that's how we can add power-ups with the help of ChatGPT and Copilot. Since the beginning, we've shown how we can use ChatGPT to add movement controls, how to add things like firing snowballs, enemies, procedural generation to create walls of snow blocks, as well as power-ups and a couple of other features that we've added over the past episodes. Don't forget to try out the game on itch.io. It's a WebGL game, so you can just run it directly in the browser. And we'll be sure to keep updating the game with all the features that we've added and anything else that we think of in the future. And I hope that you've been able to learn a little bit from this series about using generative AI to help you develop games in Unity. Again, don't forget to check out Snow Fortress 2 on VR, on Steam VR, Quest, and Pico headsets. Please leave your feedback and comments so we can see what kind of features you'd like to add and what other questions you have about generative AI and using Copilot, ChatGPT, Muse, and some of the other systems that we've used over the series. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.